Hello, my name is Jonathan Forster, and welcome to the Multi-Story Thinking podcast on interior design. I'm an interior designer and educator. My job is to improve quality of life and productivity by helping people to create beautiful and practical spaces to live and work in. The Multi-Story Thinking podcast takes an educational slant to the interior design world. If, like me, you are curious about how things are done within the industry, want to know how people got their breaks and how they've developed their careers, and get some top tips and advice, then this is the podcast for you. So sit back, relax, as we help unravel the mysteries of interior design. Naomi Cleaver is an interior designer, television presenter and writer, active in a broad range of sectors and specialising in communal living. Her work includes groundbreaking designs for student accommodation, co-living and co-working schemes across the UK. She combines a theatrical approach to shaping spaces alongside a deep understanding of the emotional and psychological impact of her work. In this episode, we discover the importance of integrating student communities into the wider community, why you need to think like a client and how Naomi's role within projects has shifted, the challenges of designing for young people and how to create a sense of ownership and belonging, why universities and accommodation providers need to adapt to the changing landscape of learning, and we discover what may be the next Black. That's recording, and this is recording. That's a backup to this.
Okay.
Because you remember last time
my darling.
Yes, that I forgot to press record on the fancy recording device. I did have a backup, but we only realised halfway through.
And that's right. And we sort of redid it
and we tried to
as much as we could.
Yeah, and the redone stuff was useless because it was so kind of forced and felt unnatural. So I just had to use the backup. So there was less time. That was the first podcast that was published. So now it's great to have you back.
It's wonderful to be back, Jonathan.
And we're in real life, which is fabulous. We're in your... Yeah. How would you describe this? Your Devon studio? Devon home?
My Devon home.
Your Devon home?
Yeah. Yeah.
Glorious views over the East Devon countryside. And
even in the mist.
Yeah, it's a little bit damp today. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about...
I don't know. What do you want to talk about?
Well, you know, what's happened since we started the podcast. We've had the pandemic. You've written a book.
I have.
And the way in which you're working has changed a little bit, as you were telling me earlier.
Yes, it has, yeah.
Talk me through it. First of all, let's go for the book.
Let's talk about the book. Yeah, no, I love the book. I wrote the book with a wonderful girl called Amy Frierson, who is an editor at large for Design. Everyone knows Design if they know design. And she's absolutely brilliant. And it's a book that is all about build-to-rent, co-living, student accommodation, co-working. So it's a book that talks about the specifics of designing for groups of people, communities. And of course, you'll know, Jonathan, I've designed lots and lots of student accommodation. Yeah. And then latterly, I've been designing lots of build-to-rent. And within that, there's kind of co-work and co-live. And of course, there's lots of kind of fluidity between those various sectors anyway. That was for the Royal Institute of British Architects. They commissioned me a couple of years ago. I found Amy, we wrote it together. It features 3 of my key projects and then projects from around the world. And it was one of the RIBA's best sellers, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I just want you to know that. Top 10.
I haven't seen a copy in the Toxham County Bookshop yet, so it must be doing
well.
Well,
that's because that bookshop's rubbish. I mean, you know.
How did you go about the process of selecting the case studies? Because there's some great case studies which you go into.
They're amazing case studies, yeah. It came quite naturally. I think because Amy and I sort of know the marketplace quite well, we already knew what were our kind of favourite ones. And it's the ones that are sort of stand out from the crowd a bit. I mean, there's a beautiful one in the States, actually in Silver Lake, which is a co-work space that also has a creche, which is really lovely and designed beautifully, but the kind of concept behind it I love, because it's just so practical and kind of socially relevant and useful. And then there's, we featured a couple of case studies from these guys, Escape, who are sort of reinventing the British high street, which desperately needs reinventing by sort of rethinking how retail space can be co-work and co-live. Actually, sort of reinventing that high street convention, which was always co-work, which was always a kind of mix of live and work.
Yes, yeah.
And of course they're taking that a little bit further and making it collaborative, which is really nice. So it's just those projects that are shared, about shared space, but have a particular feature that makes them distinctive.
You started your student accommodation
yes.
Student accommodation career with IQ in Shoreditch, was one of your early ones, wasn't it? Standalone unit.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at student accommodation being incorporated into more ambitious schemes with more functions.
What kind of hybrid schemes or more features to student accommodation, or both?
A bit of both, really.
Yeah.
Because we were looking at, when we were working last year with the Class Foundation, talking to some of the guys from the Netherlands who are creating these huge schemes which mix student accommodation with retail. That's a trend that's been emerging over the last few years and that you've been working on.
I suppose on the one hand, the student marketplace, incredibly to me, by the way, becomes more and more rich and diverse and in demand. I can't believe it's still growing, but it is still growing. As demand develops and grows, then inevitably what's on offer is going to become more complex. Basically, you've got to find new stuff in student accommodation for that student accommodation building to stand out. And then I think, on the other hand, developers are also looking at ways to diversify their property portfolio. So it's two different kinds of diversification. It's diversification for the sake of enriching the product for the student, and diversification to enhance the asset value for the investor. And 'twas ever thus, really. We're pitching a lot at the moment, and people are coming to us with portfolios of student accommodation buildings saying, right, how can we make these distinctive? And it's a tough job.
And that diversification in terms of the things that are going on within those spaces. You see it's part of a new way of looking at how we develop inner cities?
I'd like to think so, yes. I mean, I think when we're talking about communal spaces, I'd like to think that that's a kind of a micro of the macro, that there are certain things that we can learn when it comes to developing cities. I mean, I've always banged on about being cautious of student accommodation becoming student ghettos, and that integrating the wider community with the student community is incredibly important. So many of the schemes I've done, and on Build to Rent as well, I've always advocated for the communal space to be community space, almost like a village hall. And in fact, the latest scheme that we're doing for Moda, the Build to Rent scheme in Birmingham, we've got the gift of quite a lot of amenity space, what we call amenity space, shared space. So we've dedicated at least 25% of that to what's called a village hall. We're calling it a village hall. I mean, it's not that sort of original, but within Build to Rent,
it provides that function.
It provides that function. And the idea is that we support moder in making connections with external providers to run courses and events and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there's a thing about trying to integrate the students into those types of activities.
Absolutely, yes. So my project at Hoxton, that was definitely all about bringing the wider community in. But, you know, you have these ambitions, you set these goals hand in hand with the client. But in that scenario, the reality is that we were the victims of our own success. That building was 100% full before term started, basically on completion of the project. It was the jewel in that portfolio's crown for the investor, and the investor sold it. And when the project sold, then you relinquish, unfortunately, all the ambitions that you set out within the context of your design.
Yeah, so you can't continue that. That's interesting, isn't it?
You can't, no, you can't.
Yeah.
But that's life, you know, that's reality.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what really interests me about, you know, we were talking earlier about young designers, and we've talked about this before as well, that when you're at design school, you learn a lot about design, but you don't learn about the business and what the reality is of selling design. You know, you're as much an entrepreneur in a way, or, you know, product designing, you're selling a product.
Yeah. Do you think that, how would you work around getting students to take that on board?
I think they just need some teaching in how to run a design business.
Yeah.
That's it. And part of that is, you know, all those boring things like showing up on time, taking deadlines seriously, focusing on what is important, and, you know, not paying too much attention to what isn't important. You know, prioritising.
Managing the task.
Managing the task.
I think also understanding that bigger context, because actually you put all your effort into creating this long-term vision for a client, and then they sell it, having benefited from all that creativity. One needs to not be too connected to that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
emotionally, you know?
Yeah, totally. I've noticed with my teams, they get very upset if clients, and this goes for friends of mine who are designers, people get very upset if clients want to make changes.
Yeah.
I don't mind if clients want to make changes. They can make all the changes they like, as long as they pay for them.
Yes, yeah.
That's cool.
It's their project, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I get the same thing whenever we do tender documents, pitching for work, and you get yourself so invested in this vision, and then you don't win the tender, and it's like, what?
Yeah, that's painful.
Instantly got to switch off and go on to the next one. You know, it's like,
that is painful though.
Yeah. You can just imagine how great it's going to be, and then they, for some reason, whatever, they decide not to use you. It's like, well, what a waste.
But you've always got to ask potential clients as well, if they don't accept your tender, why they don't accept it, and then you can learn from that. And I mean, when I'm sort of training younger designers, especially when it comes to pitching, I always try and get them to think like the client. That's how that's what you've got to
understand what they want, haven't you?
Yeah.
And what the motivations are.
And that can be a really tough leap, because you don't have anything like the experience of the client or the investor, especially if you're a younger designer. You haven't lived a long enough life, you haven't been fiscally active in the way that your client or investor has.
And there's always the challenge that sometimes the client doesn't actually know what they want as well. I mean, how often do you come across that in the process?
Well, I think clients always have a little bit of an idea of what they want. They want to do something, and then it's your job to help them along. Now, I find commercial clients, and I suppose that's why I've specialised in commercial design over the last, 10, 15 years. It's much more straightforward, because it's, you're designing a product, and there's much less emotional investment. In fact, there's no emotional investment. It's business, so you just do it, get it done, get on with it. And any emotional investment, you focus on, as a designer, your visualization of the emotional impacts of your design for your user group, your student, because if you get that right, they're really happy, and then your investors are really happy. The worst thing actually is when you've got clients, I think, especially in private residential who know exactly what they want.
Yeah, you've got no room to be creative.
Which is fine, I suppose. Actually, the very worst type of client is the one who knows exactly what they want, but they can't describe it, and everything you show them, it's not it.
Yeah.
Whatever's in their head is not it. I don't think I've ever had one of those, but I've heard of, from mates who have those sorts of situations, and that's not great.
Yeah. Just going back to the book and the context of those co-living and build-to-rent schemes.
That's what we were talking about,
we did,
wasn't it?
A bit of a tangent, didn't we?
Yeah.
Is there a difference to the way you approach those projects in terms of the design process?
What, the kind of build-to-rent?
Yeah.
Well, the process is the same, really. The process is thinking very carefully about who your user cohort is and then responding accordingly. And of course, students are different to non-students. They have different expectations and different requirements, but not that different.
Yeah. Is there a different visual language that you need to work on, and also how do you manage the interactions? Whether is that partly to do with the management of the organisation, but also is there anything you can do in terms of design initiatives that can help smooth the interaction between the student population and the...
on hybrid schemes where you've got students and non-students? Yeah. I think you just have you would have these sort of neutral spaces. You'd have very nice, cosy... the common denominator is that it's a home, and you want even the shared spaces to feel like home. And I suppose that goes to the heart of what we're writing about in the book. How do you make space that is shared by many to feel intimate and to develop a sense of ownership within the individual?
I was just, you took the words out of my mouth there. I'm thinking that sense of ownership is quite important, isn't it?
Yeah.
There you've got different types of clients or users.
Yeah.
Trying to own the same space.
Yeah. How do you cultivate that sense of ownership and belonging?
Yeah.
Belonging is so incredibly important. That's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to belong to something. And it's little things, it's being able to move the furniture about, having lighting having quite a sophisticated lighting scheme. When I say sophisticated, I just mean sort of broken up. So it's not just overhead lighting. You've got lovely table lamps and little wall lights, and they can be controlled locally. So you might be sitting on a certain sofa and you can turn the light on and off yourself. And then having lots of breakout spaces so you can, I talk about this a lot, that you can be down in a kind of shared lounge, but you might also want to be alone. You want to be alone, but you don't want to be lonely. That's the point. You don't want to be crowded. Little things like that. Acoustics are really important. Materials, all those little details. It's in the materials and the details that you're kind of developing that kind of conversation between the building and the user. Yeah, which is nice. And then, I've done a project like the Hoxton project. Actually, that was very much designed so that people could personalise it, and that was just for students. That was solely for students, but all the furniture was mobile. We had mobile screens. We did the kitchen that was painted in chalkboard paint so they could decorate the kitchen themselves. There were notice boards. There were all sorts of things going on where they had the ability to control the space. I think that what's more interesting, and I've designed schemes with the intention, but like I say, you are vulnerable to the market. If you design a successful scheme, it will probably get sold. Especially in this marketplace. But I think what's more interesting is to see how, if you give all these people, strangers living together, the means of control, where is the friction? Where are the points of conflict? And how do you manage those? And that's something that I've never had a chance to really get involved in, which I do find quite fascinating. Like, Joe's sitting over there and he's turning on the light. Maybe you don't want him to turn on the light. Maybe it makes it too light for you. Maybe that would be really annoying.
Yes, somebody else interrupting your space. That's about how people behave in communal
Yeah.
scenarios,
Yeah.
but also how that communal scenario is managed as well.
Yes, yeah.
And that relies on the operator, doesn't it, to set that?
It does. Yeah. Yeah. So I always say to clients, we really would very much prefer and would urge a situation where we develop design with the operator. Now, oftentimes the operator isn't appointed yet when we are appointed, so that's not always possible. But sometimes it is, and the operators always have really great expertise, and we can give them ideas, and that's a really rich dialogue.
Whereabouts is the innovation coming from then? Where do you see the most progressive schemes being developed?
Well, we're doing a lot of stuff now, which is very where we think a lot about the digisphere, and I don't have much interface with young people, not like you, Jonathan.
It's a young people are, it's like they're speaking a different language much of the time.
I know.
And teaching them is hard enough. Trying to understand them is even more difficult.
Really?
But, they're just getting on with stuff.
They're getting on with stuff, yeah. And, I've got a goddaughter. She's at Exeter University, so I talk to her a lot. And my niece, who's at the University of East Anglia, and I say, right, students, what do you want? Because pre-pandemic, I was talking to students all the time.
Yes.
We'd do focus groups, and we'd get pizza and beer in, and that was all really fun and nice. With the pandemic, obviously, we weren't able to do that. And I think things have sort of changed from what I've been told by the younger people I know. Although, so the young people who work for me say, right, like you, there's a very different kind of social, cultural landscape. And there are lots of opportunities for integrating technology into the places that students particularly live in.
Yeah.
So we're developing schemes where you can more easily stream your lectures and attend to them, and maybe in little groups within your student accommodation.
The Zoom era of lecture delivery has been sort of embraced a little bit by us recording a lot more content and not necessarily doing everything via Zoom, but there are moments where the Zoom lecture is a great way of delivering stuff to everybody, and then they can watch it or listen to it again. So the need for them to come into the studio every day, all day, has sort of dissipated really. And now we're thinking, well, you work where you feel comfortable. I mean, that's the agile approach, isn't it, to office?
What do you think about that, though? I don't know whether I'm allowed to ask you questions in this, but what do you think? Is that good or bad?
It has. I think the instinct of lecturers is that everyone should be in the studio, in that culture where we're sharing space, sharing knowledge, sharing learning. You're learning from the other students, you're seeing other people do stuff, and you're getting direct contact with the lecturer, who can look at a sketchbook and say, that's good, develop this. It's a more, it's sort of face-to-face is better.
Absolutely.
However, if you are going to do some work that needs concentration, perhaps the studio isn't the best place for that. If you've got to do some reading, then somewhere else. But there's other areas.
That's always the case, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's always the case.
But I think also lots of students just tend to do the work at home. So if they're making models and drawings and stuff, they'll go and do that because they can concentrate.
I think that though sort of behoves educational institutions and student accommodation to provide those spaces, those specific workspaces that people can work in, because when I was a student, I learned most from my fellow students, I've got to say. I was at Willesden College of Technology with Steve Jensen, who's now running the first year at Royal College, your alma mater.
Yes.
And he's so wonderful and brilliant, and I learned so much from him. I learned a bit from the tutors, but we were very lucky in that we had a great year. We had him, we had another guy called Jeff Stewart, great designer, he's not a designer anymore. Another lovely guy, Nick Spears. And my friend Catherine Skellen, who now runs Skellen Studio, who's a brilliant exhibition designer. And it was just a really lucky year that we just had the group of us, and we just had this great energy, and we just loved it, and we just doing crazy things.
The groups of students who get together like that, and there's a kind of community going on. It's just something that has changed, and no one's turning up religiously for the lectures and, sitting there for 8 hours in the studio. Everyone's got other things going on. They're working, they don't feel comfortable in the environment for whatever reason. There's mental health issues that means people feel like they want to study in a different place. They'll come in for the key bits and dip out again. It's like, don't try and control it. You've just got to sort of flex with it a little bit and just make sure everyone's got access to all the information they need, Ideally, I suppose you'd want them all in, having fun around the table and getting on with it, but it's not.
Does it affect performance, do you think?
The ones that don't come in as much definitely won't perform as well. Because they'll miss something. Because when you want to intervene as a lecturer in a project, you can make massive great steps occur by just saying something, and then they'll come back 3 hours later having just done an amazing amount of redirected thought. If they miss that, then it's
maybe you should set them a project to design spaces on campus that they would feel comfortable withdrawing to.
Well, we do a lot of that sort of thing. What's that beeping?
Sorry, that's the dishwasher.
The dishwasher. Thank God for that. I thought it was some alarm.
You do set them projects like that, don't you? You do a lot of student accommodation in your course.
And that really unravels, not unravels, that sort of reveals some great insight into how they want to operate.
Fascinating.
But I suppose what we've got is that hangover from the art school ethos of the studio being a place where things happen and everyone comes into the studio. You all have a space. We're no longer able to deliver that. So we're looking at, where are the other spaces that students can work, which comes back to your point about the student accommodation providing more facilities, not just the bed room. And that would have been it, wouldn't it? Now you want a sort of studio culture in your halls of residence.
Absolutely. I mean, one project we did a couple of years ago is called Calico in Liverpool. Over 700 beds, so one of the biggest student accommodation schemes in Europe. What was amazing, we had 10,000 square feet, about 100 square metres of amenity space, which was kind of, if you look at the marketplace, kind of way more than you as an investor would calculate, would provide. So it's very, very generous provision. But it meant that we could do loads of stuff in it, and we just did loads of different kinds of study spaces, as well as lots of great sort of play spaces, really. And that won Best Student Study Environment 2021, I think, last year, That's a definite trend that we've identified right here on this podcast, Jonathan.
Yes.
Actually. But the other thing about so we talked a little bit about, the digisphere, and streaming lectures and all that, and that goes to what we've been talking about in terms of sort of diversifying study spaces within student accommodation. But one thing we also do a lot of now, and you heard it here first, because I think we're the first to do it actually on co-living and build-to-rent schemes, is create content creation pods. So basically, little studios, because everybody's their own producer, director, talent agent these days. So they tell me.
Podcast
host.
You can do it all.
So we're designing these little rooms that people can use, little rooms and larger rooms, for photography and stuff. And the key really is to make those spaces multifunctional, so that's super flexible.
That's the photography for the Depop account.
That's it.
A bit of Instagramming, that sort of thing.
All of that
TikTok
stuff that I do all the time.
Yes, we're all over that, aren't
we? So over it.
Yes.
So But what we'll do is we'll take like the studio that's en suite to the gym, where you could use that for yoga or Zumba or whatever. But that can also be your we'll design it in a way that you can use that for photography or even an event or filming.
Multifunctional spaces and flexible spaces.
Flexible spaces, and then the smaller pods, the little content creation pods, where you might just have that intimate sort of podcast where the acoustic, I mean, we're in my kitchen, so the acoustics are probably rubbish, but so we're designing these little spaces to have perfect acoustics and be really beautiful as well. So you can do a little bit of, photography or whatever, what they call reels or something around.
Yes. Don't pretend you don't know what they're talking about.
But those rooms can also be like video call rooms as well.
Yeah. And then you could do those. You could dial into a lecture from that point.
You
or
can dial into a lecture.
Call.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's the grown-up application in office fit-outs, the Zoom.
Yeah.
Zoom pod.
Absolutely, because also, if you're in a shared space, there's nothing worse than listening to somebody on their bloody phone.
No.
And similarly on a Zoom call, just go away. And also, you don't want to be exposed. If you're the person on the phone or on the Zoom call, you don't want everyone listening to your business. Thank you very much. I think privacy, by the way, is going to be the new black. I think absolutely, especially in the light of what's going on in the world. I think kind of discretion, privacy, keeping things a bit private.
People want to have security, don't they? In the sense of emotional security and...
Emotional security, just why do we have to go on? Why is there this kind of cultural pressure, I suppose, particularly on young people, to be very vocal and visible about who they are and what they're doing and where they're doing it?
That's built into the whole operating system of digital technology, though, isn't it? To be...
Well, it's a Californian cabal.
By which you mean those guys in Palo Alto? I
do, yeah. I'm surprised kids aren't more anarchic about all that stuff.
But it's such fun, why would they be? Isn't it?
Is it? Well, don't kids also really suffer from it?
We need some young people in here to give us a sense of balance.
Yeah, we do.
And I think I've sold my soul to Apple with my various devices and reasonably happy with it. It's like, if it's working for you, what's the problem? But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, devices. Yeah, I was just throwing in that idea of privacy because I think that's a really interesting.
You're talking about creating privacy within interior spaces.
Privacy in interior spaces, but also, design for me, I'm a designer, but really designer is 5% of what I'm really interested in. It's kind of the sort of end point of the stuff that really excites me and captures my imagination, and that's really, the stuff that does interest me is kind of human behaviour and beauty, what is beautiful and all that kind of stuff.
You're getting more philosophical as you get older now about the impact of design on people.
I've always been this philosophical, Jonathan, actually.
Of course. Yeah.
Always. How people behave in space is always what's fascinated me.
Yeah, yeah.
And then all the stuff on top of that is an expression of my thoughts on that phenomena.
Yeah. I think getting to a point where you understand the impact of what you're designing is really insightful. It's for a long time, I think I was focused on what things looked like,
Were you?
In the early years, it's just about what's the latest trend, there's lots of that.
But that's okay, because I'm sure the motivation behind that was that you wanted things to make you or others feel good.
I think it's just understanding that at a slightly deeper level, the psychological impact of design on people and, how different people respond to space as well it's not always at the forefront of what's being taught, or wasn't, certainly years ago. I can't remember really, to be honest, it's such a long time
ago.
might be talking a little bit.
Did you get taught anything? No.
I don't remember being taught anything. I honestly don't know what they do.
But that is also the fascinating thing about design education as well, or just design, you know, how sort of multifarious it is. You know, you get your decorators and so-called designers, and then you get sort of people like us, and then you get your architects, and it's all the same, but it's all so different as well. People coming from very, very different places.
The approaches, I think there's definitely difference in how those different disciplines approach the problem of designing interiors. I guess we're trying to promote that human-centred, user-focused, you know, it's always, you know, sort of cliches in a way.
Yeah, but surely all design should be human-centred and user-focused.
In terms of, you talk about working with other consultants, you've done, well, you were saying earlier about your kind of shift in the relationship you have towards projects, and your process of collaboration has become much more important.
Yeah, so before the lockdown, I was thinking I wanted to kind of wind things down a little bit because, as you know, Jonathan, I was travelling the whole time, busy. And then the lockdown came, and then I thought, oh, well, maybe I should just retire. But then I know I'll be a bit bored. So what I thought I'd really like to do is advise, you know, really focus on the things that I love doing. So I really love that kind of top-end design strategy and thinking, advising clients, working with design teams. And then I also love designing furniture. I've designed lots and lots of furniture on my schemes. So what I'm transitioning into is I'm transitioning away from the sort of front line of delivering projects. And I'm taking on consultancy briefs now. So, for example, I'm consulting with an investor in Australia on a portfolio of build-to-rent schemes. First one is in Brisbane, which is really wonderful. I mean, I'm loving it. Very early morning calls, but really professional Australian team. I've never been to Australia. It was absolutely amazing. I can't wait to go. So that's been really, really fun. And then I'm also advising a new interior design studio, and we've just been appointed by Renica to sort of reinvent their co-living build-to-rent product. So that's great. And then we're also working with Bearings on their very first kind of build-to-rent portfolio as well. And then we've got lots of pictures out. So yeah, it's exciting. And then I'm also designing a range of contract furniture, and then I'm also working on developing a range of really beautiful, highly crafted, refined sorts of furniture as well. Couture and off the peg.
Sounds interesting. And the design work for the consultancy, how does that differ in what you're saying more strategic? How does it differ in the process of what you're delivering? It means
that I don't have to run teams of designers.
Yeah.
So I'm not having to sort of check that everybody's doing what they're meant to be doing at a certain time, checking over drawings, checking over specs. I don't have to do any of that.
It's more high level
creativity. It's more high level, yeah. Which is the fun stuff, you know, and that's where I can really focus my energies. So,
You don't miss those door schedules then?
I don't miss the door schedules, no, nor correcting spelling on the specs or, you know, any of that stuff, strangely.
Are you feeling like relieved of the burden of all the management, and then you can be more creative?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm really, really honest, I think what I've learned is that I love working with people. I really get a buzz out of collaborating with people, but I do not have the character to run a design company. I just have to be really honest about that. I don't enjoy it. Yeah. I've done it for the last few years because I had so much work. I had to push it out.
Well, if you're running a business, you've got to kind of, you know, it's like the baby bird, isn't it? You've got to keep feeding it.
Keep feeding it. I mean, I've had a design business for nearly 30 years. It's been very successful, touch wood. And within that, I've done lots of other things. And I love that. I love that kind of portfolio career. I love that kind of agility and flexibility and being able to kind of jump on lots of different things and just get stuck in and do it and move on to the next thing.
Going back to what you said earlier, I don't think we teach people how to run businesses, do we, at the university?
No.
I mean, there's more of that content coming through, but actually the really nitty-gritty of doing it, which you can only really learn by doing it, in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is an opportunity for courses to teach students, to prepare them, let's say, perhaps not teach them things, but prepare them for what to expect if they are to. A lot of students, especially in our generation, when it was, really bad recession, a lot of our mates just left college and there weren't any jobs, so they had to set up their own thing. But you can prepare kids for what to expect, I suppose, and prepare their attitude as well.
Yeah. The thing about the interiors sector is that there are so many different ways of making a living that you can get right into one without really needing to know. Well, you're just so far away from everyone else's niche, like the student accommodation world. When we did that thing with the class foundation last year, you became, because I was not familiar with them as an organisation before we got together on those workshops, and you just realise that there's so many people out there just focusing everything, all their attentions to that student accommodation, co-living environment.
Which I think is good. It's good to kind of be that sort of connoisseur. That idea of connoisseurship is really important. But I think especially in design, it's so important to be open-minded, have a 360 view.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's why I sort of I feel dismayed by the kind of fracturing of the design profession in a way, because if you're creating a building for humans to inhabit, you need architecture and interior decoration, and all those things should work in concert. And it's our job as a designer not to we're not artists, we are strategists, I think.
Yeah.
It's our job to sort of analyse what a problem is and then put together the solution from lots and lots of different aspects, I suppose. It's like making a cake, isn't it? Lots of different ingredients.
Yeah. Do you think that we often just have one of those practitioners trying to do all of those roles then? Like the architect trying to do the interiors?
Sometimes that happens, and you can see.
It breaks down.
Yeah.
You need an interior designer with a strategic sort of sense of space use, as well as
That's
an ability
right,
to put together a palette of materials.
It's, you're making me think of my book title, All Together Now, which is, it is about collaboration and having sympathy and empathy for the people you are designing for, but the people you're designing with as well.
Yeah.
And having respect for their expertise. So, yes, you as an interior architect, designer, I mean, even the nomenclature is just all over the shop, isn't it? But we as the kind of interior designers whose practice sort of couched in architecture, I think are a bit oversensitive about being called interior designers, because that term is so bastardised.
Yeah. I'm not even trained as an interior designer, curiously enough, but
nor am I.
I think shock horror.
All these people who just call themselves interior designers, they're not even trained.
Just like you and me. I know, it's how things turned out. But yeah, the term interior design, interior decorator is looked. I think they're looked down on by other parts of the built environment industry.
Yeah.
But actually, that's the bit that delivers the magic at a face-to-face level, isn't it? With the.
It's what clients perceive. It's what users perceive.
Yeah.
I've got certain clients who just think, well, one or two maybe, for whom the interior design is just not that relevant. But I always say, and I'm bound to say it, but I mean, that's what, the people who live in that building, they perceive that. That's where they They
It's the touch and
see
feel,
the
isn't it?
value.
Yeah.
That's where they see the value. They don't walk up to the building and think, oh, that's an amazing building I'm going to live in. They think about what's going on the inside.
Yeah.
They think about the outside, but much more the inside.
It's a more intimate relationship, isn't it?
Yeah.
With the
But
spaces.
look, great architects. I mean, there are architects who are skilled at interior design. It will have that kind of architectural sort of atmosphere and vibe and approach, and that may be extremely appropriate for that particular brief. But good architects will respect the expertise of interior design, and interior designers will, good interior designers will respect the expertise of the architect, and it's a beautiful collaborative process when it goes well.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank Naomi for taking the time to talk to me. It's really good to see her again in person this time and to talk about the shifts in the student accommodation industry and the co-living and PBSA markets. This is very much part of the discussions we had when we took part in a Class Foundation Academy event last year, and Naomi's book, All Together Now, charts the emergence of these new types of spaces with lots of really great case studies and examples from across the globe of new ways of integrating students, professionals and local communities around city centre sites. Something that we've been trying to implement down at the University of Plymouth. We had some of our students working on the ground floor spaces of the Roland Novinsky building, which is now a more public and better utilised space with an art gallery, cafe and cinema, and areas for students to work and socialise. And a lot of this thinking is feeding its way into the way we're teaching on our interior design course at the University of Plymouth. If you'd like to know how to become a kick-ass interior designer, follow the links in the notes. I'd like to thank Dave Clark from I Am The How for production support and invaluable advice in the setting up of this podcast, Kay Hansen for her planning support and co-hosting for these and our educational podcasts for the University of Plymouth, and Mark Frith for the music. I'd really like to hear your feedback. Leave a comment or get in touch via the website or on Instagram. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Thank you.